So one of the most important things that we're talking about here is that all of these statistics, they allude to the fact that we have this problem. And what is one of the most challenging issues for Muslims is how to reinforce positive social norms and to raise those children upon the religion of Islam. Now, fundamentally, naturally, what will follow from this is that we should be role modeling for our children. This is through teaching and communication and instruction, but they also learn through observation, social modeling, and observational learning. This is absolutely necessary for a child to grow. So if we look at, so for example, when we the Quran tells us that we should, يا أيها الذين آمنوا ادخلوا في السلم كافة ولا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان. O you who believe, enter into the faith completely and do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. This is very important because the concept and the importance of role modeling in here, that we ourselves need to be role models for our children. The Prophet ﷺ, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ, that the Prophet ﷺ was that you will find in the Prophet ﷺ a tremendous example. And we have to be examples. Because how did the Sahaba become the Sahaba? The word Sahaba is from Suhba. And that means to have companionship. And so they learned from the Prophet ﷺ. Not only did he recite the verses onto them, in which they memorized it, but وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ, that he purified them through his actions, and he taught them. And the hikmah in this ayah, the Mufassirin say, is the sunnah, the living action of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is necessary. So as Muslims, for example, when we say to our children that you must pray all of your salahs, and they say, okay, that's great, I'll pray all of my salahs. But then when we go to the market or the store and it's Maghrib time or Asr time or something, in the winter days it's short, and we say, you know what, forget it, we'll pray at home. We'll just do qada later, like it's something light, something easy. And so the child is getting mixed messages. On the one hand, you're saying, wait, there's this Allah that's always watching you. Sami'u al-Basir, He's all hearing, all watching you. That He is watching you. But then we're not praying salah. And then when we have an affliction or a challenge, that if we turn to the asbab of the dunya, the means that has been given to us in the dunya, but we don't turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, that is a contradiction. Because you're saying to the child, there is this omnipotent being, there is this Allah who will watch over you, who will take care of you. وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. That in the Quran it says, there's not a single creature that walks the face of this planet except that Allah takes it upon Himself to ensure their sustenance. And then what happens? If you lose your job, then you're looking for other sources to help you. That's no problem. You should tie your camel. You should look for other sources. But the problem is that when you do that first, and you don't turn to Allah, that is a signal that why would you turn to a man who is limited when the Allah that has made this and who has taken responsibility for your risk to, as opposed to turning to Allah, turning to the limited being as opposed to the unlimited being. So that's a mixed message that we're getting into, and children hear and listen. One of the things is that as human beings, we are social creatures by our very design and essence. And that we pick up the messages that we have been given in childhood and we internalize them. We might not consciously understand this, but we internalize them subconsciously to such an extent where that becomes an automatic tendency later on, even whether we recognize it or not. For example, if a person's default is that they get angry when something goes wrong, then when the child grows up and they get married and they've seen their parents and their father get aggressive with their mother, what will they do? Well, in their frustration, you're not thinking. What you do is you do what's automatic, what's most familiar, what comes naturally to you. And that is something that has been internalized. So this is the point about tarbiyah. Tarbiyah is not only about teaching them and making them do actions, but that they must have an internalization of this religion in which they see this practice. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu was 13 years old when the Prophet ﷺ passed away. And he spent 30 months with the Prophet ﷺ. It's within this time frame of tarbiyah. He spent 30 months with the Prophet ﷺ. And he passed away, and the Prophet ﷺ passed away when he was 13 years old. What was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud known for? Anybody have a guess? Aside from the Shaykh?
Hadith.
Huh? What was he known for? What was he ma'aruf? What was the fun, the knowledge that he had most of? Tafsir al-Quran, correct. He was the greatest mufassir among the Sahaba. That grown men used to come to this child to learn the tafsir of the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because the Aisha radiallahu anha described the Prophet ﷺ al-Quran. That his actions, his whole being, his akhlaq, his conduct was the Quran. And so when you look at the Prophet ﷺ, you understand how to be a human being. And you understand the message of the Quran. So he only spent 2.5 years with the Prophet ﷺ. And not only that, but he also made dua for him. That the Prophet ﷺ made a dua, Allahumma faqihu fi d-din wa 'allimhu at-ta'wil. That, oh Allah, teach him, give him understanding of religion and teach him the interpretations. So a few things, as parents, what can we do? One is dua, and the other is social role modeling. To do that and to role model for our children. Because the Prophet ﷺ, what was the upbringing of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu? He was, for example, he went to sleep over at Maymuna radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ's house. He's narrating this. And the Prophet ﷺ gets up in the middle of the night. And he's a child. So he sees the Prophet ﷺ get up. So he wants to do what the Prophet ﷺ is doing. So he gets up and he sees that he's washing. He doesn't know what's going on, but he starts washing and making wudu like him. Then he comes to join the Prophet ﷺ in salah. And the Prophet ﷺ, we know that he used to stand حَتَّى تَنْتَفَخَتْ قَدَمَاهُ, that his feet would swell in salah. And so what would Abdullah ibn Abbas as a child comes and joins the salah from the left side. The Prophet ﷺ spins him around while he's in his salah to his right side. Brings him to his right side. Now this was the role modeling, the madrasa. You know, they say the mother's lap is the first madrasa, the school of the child. The home is the first school of the child. So as they're growing up, if they are seeing these things, not that you send them to somebody else, an Islamic school, and tell them that they have to raise your child and teach them religion. Then they come home and they get these contradictory messages. That is an absence of role modeling. And so we need to role model, and we need not contradict ourselves and give. So they say like a person has an effect in their words to the extent that they practice those words. A person can take another individual only as far as they've gone themselves. Illa mashallah, with exception. As I mentioned to you all of these statistics of Muslims, and Muslims' religiosity in America is going down. And Muslims have deluded themselves because the majority of Muslims either think that their religious practice is either unchanged, the state of Muslims in America has either not changed or is getting better. which is sort of not in tune with reality, because there's numerous statistics to suggest otherwise. And the fact that religiosity as a whole in America is declining. And so we need to take this very importantly. The other thing that I want to mention is that the need to raise that child and to reinforce a positive sense of self in that child is absolutely instrumental. Self-esteem grows, and people form, and remember, we are social humans by our very design. So we incorporate the messages that we are told. So a child doesn't know whether they're intelligent or dumb yet. They don't know that. You tell them that. And whatever you tell them, that's what they'll be. Okay? And you know, one of the most extreme psychologists of like the behaviorist tradition, he said that give me a child, his name was Watson, and I'll make him whatever you want me to make him. I'll make him a criminal, I'll make him a jurist, a lawyer, a moral person, whatever you want. I'll make that child for you. Now, a little bit extreme in the sense that you don't have complete power over everything, but the point is that what you tell the child, that's what they'll believe. So when a child is told over and over again that, you know, in some children, for example, they're told that they're very intelligent. You know, they might come from like a really educated family, they're both doctors or something like that, and the child goes to the library shelf and picks up a biology book. It's like 3 years old, doesn't know what they're doing, right? So you just go and grab a biology book, start flipping through it. And the parents say, look at this guy, mashallah. He's a born doctor. It's in his blood. Well, probably it was just the fancy colors on the page that drew him to that. Or maybe he wanted to take out his anger. He's like peeing on the book or something, you know? but the reality is whatever you reinforce in that child, they will internalize that. So they respond to social attention. So they're going to pick up the book and they're like, oh, I did something special there. I picked up this book. Apparently this book is the golden book. And you're like, look, he just keeps going to the biology book. That's because you keep reinforcing that message, right? Similarly, when you have a child that is a little slower than your firstborn or secondborn, and you say to that child, oh, this child is not very intelligent, or this child is naughty, or you know, he's misbehaved. And you say that this, you know, some people like say some crazy things. They say this child's shaitan, or this one's like the angelic one, you know. And that's kind of crazy. You're calling your kid a little devil. Maybe some people think he's cute, this person's shaitan, and all this. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't really want to call my child a devil, especially I don't want him thinking he's a devil. Right? But there's a message that, oh, I'm the bad one. Even if it's a joke. Even if it's a joke, they begin to realize in comparison to my older brother or sister, I'm the one that's not as intelligent. And what happens when they grow up? What do? If a person's intelligent, let's put aside the reality. We know there are some biological predispositions towards more intelligence or not. But let's put that aside for a moment. Let's say that a child who's got average intelligence compared to a child who's very intelligent goes to school. If that child has a healthy self-esteem, the average student, they'll put in 3-4 hours a day to study. And they'll get the same grades as the one who studied for half an hour and got the good grades because they're intelligent. Like they're inherently intelligent. But the difference is this child is like, see, I got great grades, I'm intelligent, even though they put in 3 hours. What pushed them to put in that 3 hours? It was the fact that they believed themselves to be intelligent. And they received these messages somewhere along the way. That's why it's very important that we focus on the messages that we give to children and to role model messages that they will acquire. You know, children are listening. They're like a little sponge. And you know this because sometimes you take your child out and they're not supposed to be saying some of the family things that they're saying to other people. You know, for example, my son says that when we went to like a restaurant, a fish house one day, it was like Halloween. One child, he was like 6 years old, and one person said, so buddy, where are you going for, are you excited about Halloween for trick-or-treating? He's like, astaghfirullah, that's the devil's day. And I was like, shh, let's go, Yusuf, let's go, right? I mean, he probably heard that at home, right? I mean, he didn't make it up, the reality is. But sometimes we don't want those kind of messages going out. And I'm probably too ashamed to mention other messages that he would have mentioned to others. But we all have probably those moments that have children that have the ability to understand a little bit. So the messages that they hear at home, instrumental towards their development. That's the bottom line. And the fitrah is their natural growth tendency, and we want to nurture that. We want to grow that. We want to develop that, because that is beautiful in and of itself. It's a God-given positivity. It's a God-given potential and goodness that is inside every human being, all of us. That's why it's important to consider that even when your child is messing around, they still have a fitrah. It's just covered up right now. You cannot have a negative view of your children. The moment you lose hope in that child will lose hope in themselves. That you have to pull yourself to think that this child is under some kind of influence at the moment. But that fundamentally they have a good core. And we need to extract that from that individual. This is frozen too. There's a saying, Arabic proverb, "At-taqdeeru yadhaku ala al-taqdeer," that fate laughs in the face of plans. You know, so we had a plan here to have some slides, and so we are not necessarily capitalizing on that plan, because sometimes Allah does these things to show who's boss. You know, where I'm boss. And you better recognize it, because you might try to have a plan, but if I don't will that plan to go through, it's not going to happen. So, I mentioned this about the Ibn Abbas. The other thing is important, is that a part of role modeling is that you need self-care. You have to take care of yourself as parents. Particularly mothers. They must take care of themselves, because it is, I mean, men cannot understand this. I'm including myself in this, you know, surprise. It's so draining for, I mean, imagine, like, I cannot imagine how women does this. To stay up at night, get a little amount of sleep, constantly attend to the child. I can't do it. I would go insane. I'll probably throw my baby out the window. You know, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alhamdulillah, has put something in the mothers that have their tolerance level much higher than men in dealing with children. But the reality is that we need self-care. That you cannot always, you're going to have compassion fatigue. You're going to burn out. How are you going to always be attentive, listening to your stories of your children? All of these things, and you must be able to unwind, have something. If you're turning to salah, let that be your coping. Do something for yourself. Do some kind of adhkar. Ground yourself. Have like a moment where you isolate yourself and just ponder upon the dhikr of Allah, the creation of Allah, the finiteness of the world, something such that you can gather yourself and you can be present. And these technology things are screwing it up. The phones, I mean, here for me too, because everybody expects that you text them back very quickly, and that you're checking your mail. And we take our work home nowadays. But we have to learn to shut that off. We got to learn to interact with our children. It's absolutely necessary. Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu spent 10 years with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he lived to the age of 103 years old, and he said that not a day went back after the demise after the demise of the Prophet ﷺ, not a day passed in which I didn't see him in my dreams. And not a day passed in which I did not cry upon the memory of the face of the Prophet ﷺ. How do you have these memories if you don't see your child? If they don't even remember your face? Not only that, but if we're coming home and carrying all this baggage home, all of this stress and frustration, and then we say, leave me alone right now. Oh, no, I can't. You're ignoring your children. Who had more stress than the Prophet ﷺ? Who had more stress than the Prophet ﷺ? Nobody. He carried literally the weight of the shoulders of the world on his shoulders. But yet, Anas bin Malik had a brother, and his bird died. It was Nughayl, was his bird. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Aba Umayr, ma fa'ala Nughayl. He said this, and think about this. He says that, and the kunya, even though he was a child, he didn't have a son, the kunya is sometimes used for affection, closeness. When you're close to somebody, you refer to them by their kunya. And so, with a word of compassion, with endearment, addresses the brother of Anas bin Malik and says, what happened to your bird named Nughayl? He passed away, he knew what happened. He's recognizing, acknowledging that this occurred. Think about, you think the Prophet ﷺ had time to worry and think about what the bird was doing? This was a bird. He had his uncle Hamza pass away. He had, in the Am al-Huzn, the year of grief where the Prophet ﷺ was so depressed, where Khadija radiallahu anha passed away. And his uncle Abu Talib passed away without accepting Islam, and that was very distressful upon him, even though he supported him. What was the condition of the Prophet ﷺ? That he said, if you knew my condition, you would laugh less and cry more. But did he actually laugh less? No, he didn't. And some people take this to mean that, that means that the Prophet ﷺ was like shadid, like he didn't smile, he didn't laugh, he didn't joke. The Sahaba said to the Prophet إِنَّكَ لَتُدَاعِبُنَا. That it's so strange. You joke and play with us. You're a prophet. You know the secrets and the mysteries of the world. And he said, إِنِّي لَا أَقُولُ إِلَّا الْحَقِّ. That I don't say anything except that I don't say anything except that it's true. I joke with you, I mess around, but I don't breach the boundaries. A Sahabi, Abdullah ibn Harith, said that مَا رَأَيْتُ أَكْثَرَ تَبَسُّمًا مِنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. I had not seen anybody that would smile more than the Prophet ﷺ. And remember, this is in the context of what? That he says that if you knew my reality, you would laugh less and cry more. Not that you shouldn't smile, but the reality of what I'm dealing with, that the Quran, when it comes down to the camel he's riding goes to the ground because of the heaviness of the Quran, the weight and magnitude of it. So who had more stress than the Prophet ﷺ? Who had more stress? And so we have no excuse to say we're stressed, we're frustrated, we don't have time for our children. The reality is, you have to have time for your children. If you don't, then somebody else will. One time, and then we're moving to the loving the children and showing them love. One time, the Prophet ﷺ held his grandson and kissed him in public. And it's very important to be able to speak, communicate, interact with your children, know what their world is about, role model positivity for them, but to show them love explicitly. Because The Prophet ﷺ did this. And he took Hassan radiallahu anhu and he kissed him. He picked him up and he kissed him. And a man came to him and he said he did this in public. Everything the Prophet ﷺ did was a lesson for us. And he said, مَنْ لَا يَرْحَمْ لَا يُرْحَمْ. That whosoever doesn't show mercy is not showing mercy. Now we can translate this two ways. This is a benefit in the Arabic language. Al-fi'l al-mudari, the verb in this verb in the present can also be translated in the future. So there's two meanings we can take from this. One is that whosoever doesn't show mercy, naturally, if we say in the present tense, will not be shown mercy. A person, if they're harsh, nobody will want to be around them. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةً مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَنْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. That it is from the mercy of Allah that we made you soft-natured. That if you had been harsh and hard-hearted, no one would come around you. And so in this, whosoever doesn't show mercy is not shown mercy, meaning people will not want to interact with you. Who wants to hang around a person that's harsh and hard-hearted? But if we say in the future tense, he will not be shown mercy, there's also another meaning that comes out of that. Think about that. By whom? If you don't show your child mercy, in the future, he won't show you mercy. Think about that. How will a child, you ignored the child, beat him when he did something wrong, didn't kiss him, didn't show much affection, and were frustrated, and then in your old age, you say you must take care of me. That child doesn't want to come near you. They have trauma regarding you. And I see this, I see a lot of children with family, or adults with family of origin issues. They have issues that they cannot come close to their parents because or they're forced to. They do it and they don't feel it. Because it's not in their hearts. How can you be given mercy if you have not shown mercy? So this is very important. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he was with Anas radiallahu anhu, Anas radiallahu anhu said, for 10 years, he said, for 10 years that I served the Prophet ﷺ, he never hit me, he never insulted me, admonished me, or told me why I didn't even do a thing when I didn't do it. The reality, the question then comes, well then what do we do? Because we want to discipline the child, right? So there is a necessity for discipline. So that's some of these strategies. We'll talk a little bit about these strategies. But the very first and foremost and important one is positive reinforcement, meaning that you are reinforcing the positive in them. You are, instead of telling them what not to do, tell them what to do. You understand the difference? That مَنْ رَأَى مِنْكُمْ مُنْكَرًا فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ. We know this hadith. And إِلَى آخر, to the end. Whosoever sees an evil, they should change it with their hands. But what does change it with their hands mean? Some people say stop. They translate that inaccurately. It's to change it. What is to change? It's وَضْعُ الشَّيْءِ فِي غَيْرِ مَحَلِّهِ. To put something in its place. So you must call when you do amr bil ma'ruf, when you call towards the good, some people say it automatically gets rid of the evil. You're doing nahy anil munkar, that you're getting rid of evil by calling towards good. So when you call a child towards doing what to do, when you tell a child, psychologists say this, you say to the child, why did you do this? They say what child has a good response? They say to you, I don't know. Or they just do this, in some colleges, just I was teaching at some school one time, it was like a culture class, because Dad would want me to look at him when I was talking to him. Different cultures do different things, right? And so I think, and forgive my generalization, it might be my poor understanding, but in the further Eastern countries, and by this I mean I think something in Pakistani cultures tend to ask the child to look down. And so there's a culture clash. The children were predominantly Indian Pakistan. So I'm talking to a kid, and I said, look at me when I'm talking to you. And the child was like really scared to look at me. He thought I was messing with him, like I was gonna hit him or something. But, so the child never has a good response. What are they gonna say? They don't have a good response for you. So what you should do is you should tell them what to do instead. Tell them, and the other thing is show empathy. The child, when they're, they're just being a child, they're not trying to be evil. So when a child is asking for something, they're hungry. They don't know that they're hungry. Well, they do, but they don't recognize that their actions are related to their hunger. You do. And so it's your responsibility to make that connection for them. So tell the child, I recognize that you're hungry. What does that do? That'll soften the child because they'll say, oh, you acknowledge a core need that I have right now. And you should tell them what to do instead of it. Why don't you, when you get hungry, do you notice that you start to do stuff like this? You're helping the child make connections. This is very important for children to be able to make connections between their emotions. Oh, you're very sad right now. That's okay. It's okay for the child to feel those emotions. But the key is, what are you going to tell them to do in place of it? How are you going to deal with it? That's the teaching moment. And so after you, and I'm not suggesting you don't have discipline, you should have a structure. Structure is instrumental and necessary. You have to have a structure such that they know what actions lead to what. In fact, you should have a structure such that you should always follow the rule. Don't let them off. Now you're like, wait a minute, this guy's telling us to be merciful, don't let them off. But don't let them off. And there's a reason why I'm saying that. When you let a child off the hook for a rule they broke that they should have gotten a consequence for, what they say is that you are in control of the punishment and consequence. Of the reward and punishment. Stay with me here for a moment. That you are in control, meaning that if you desire, you can inflict punishment, and if you desire, you can let them off the hook. But that's not the message we want to give them. What we want them to learn is that their actions determine the outcome, not our actions. Do you understand the difference? That when they do something, that they will necessarily get a punishment. So the reality is, one day if you decide to be mean in their eyes, and you don't let them off the hook, they're going to be, man, this guy's being a jerk. You let me off the hook before, why won't you let me do it again? No. We want them to recognize that there is consequence for their actions. Just like in the world there's consequence for their actions, and in the akhirah there's consequence for your actions. It's not about ego. It's not about me here. It's about you. I'm punishing you. The Prophet ﷺ never got angry, meaning that the anger that we think of in the ego, like, how dare you do this? I'm your dad. I deserve respect. In reality, we don't deserve respect. What have we fulfilled all of the rights of our children? No. I mean, are we the perfect human being? Are we even close to the Prophet ﷺ? No, we're not. So we don't really deserve respect, but they should learn respect for the figure of a father so that it will help them recognize how to be with authority, how to behave, how to be cordial, and how to learn the positive behaviors. This is what's necessary for the child to do. Very importantly, after the consequence is given, whether positive or negative, two things. Give them an opportunity to change it. Meaning, you lost a reward here. You lost your opportunity to do the following, play video games. Give them an opportunity to regain it. It's bayn al-khawfi wa raja. That it is, deen is between khawf and raja. That it is between fear and hope. Don't ever kill the hope of your child. You give them the opportunity to redeem themselves. Okay, you lost this. This necessitates a week off of this. But if you are on your best behavior for the next 3 days and you don't do the following action that you did, then you can get it back in 3 days. There's a system we have to understand that Allah does targheeb, He motivates us by reward and consequence. So there's an inherent system here. And so we have to do the same thing. But that there's always an opportunity for return. Tawbah. We can always turn to Allah. And so they must be able to do tawbah. One of the conditions of tawbah is to do tark, to leave the sin. Otherwise, your tawbah is not accepted. You can say, I'm going to do this tomorrow. I'm going to drink tomorrow, but forgive me for drinking today. Or some people do like a preemptive tawbah. Then I'm about to do something really crazy. Allah forgive me. It's like, that is not going to be accepted. That's a sort of interesting way of looking at the world. But you have to give them hope, and you also have to debrief them. You cannot take for granted that they understand the consequence. They understand, they're making the connections. They're just like, all right, I did something, and for some reason I'm punished. I don't know why. I guess I'm punished because my dad's a jerk right now. No, you have to be able to tell them, come here. After the cooling down phase, sit with them and say, do you recognize what happened here? Let's talk about this. You just have no clue. Sometimes you'll be surprised. If you have a conversation with them, you'll understand that they really didn't understand what you did for them. Sometimes they'll get it. That's good. You don't really have to do much explanation. So you understand what the consequences and why. It's like, yeah. So do you know what you need to do to improve next time? Yes. And sometimes they have no clue. I have no idea why you're punished. It doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, fair enough. If you tell them, well, too bad, that's not going to make it go away. They're not going to learn anything by that. They're just going to learn to fear you. What's going to happen when they fear you and they don't fear Allah? Off comes the hijab after they're 14. The Prophet ﷺ said, أَعِينُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ عَلَى الْبِرِّ مَنْ شَاءَ اسْتَخْرَجَ الْعُقُوقَ مِنْ وَلَدِهِ. Aid your children in their obedience to you. And then the next hadith in the narrations comes, Tabarani relates, he says, the Prophet ﷺ says to the Sahaba, he says, رحم الله والدا أعان ولده على البر. Same concept. Mercy be upon the parent that helps their child in their obedience to him. And he said, or her. And they say, very good question for us. All of us are probably wondering, how? Tell me how. And so here's the secret. It's not a secret, it's in the hadith, you can look it up. They say, the Sahaba say, قالوا كيف يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم? How? He says, فقال يقبل إحسانه ويتجاوز عن إساءته. That he accepts his good gestures and he overlooks the bad. Meaning that you should, there's two things that can come out of this. One is a general sense of rahmah. Another way that we can understand this is that when a person has high expectations expectations for the child. You must be a doctor. What happens? If they disobey you, they get that you put a lot of pressure on them. They become a disobedient child now. Right? But if you set the bar lower, my son, be whatever you can be. Just do good. Know what you want to do and be a good person. The bar is much lower. Now will they be disobedient if they're not a doctor? No. So you must accept the good. There's no problem with encouraging them. It's like this guy just hates doctors or something. No. Like, encourage them to be doctors if you want them to. But if they can't, or that's not their thing, that's not their cup of tea, they don't like it, or that's not their skill set, يَتَجَاوَزُوا عَنْ إِسَاءَتِهِمْ. Overlook it. Say, you know what? Let's have a conversation. What can we look at other options? How can we look at other options for you? And this spending time for men is much more important. I see, I do a lot of couples counseling, and the women are always like, oftentimes women bring like husbands to counseling. I've seen that as like a general trend, you know? Because men are like, I don't need anybody to tell me what to do. I know what to do. That's kind of like the problem. It's like, a lot of the times we don't know what to do, but we pretend like we know what to do. Like we don't ask directions. We just get lost for half an hour. You know? A woman will ask for directions, but when a man is like, I know where I'm going. Don't tell me where I'm going. I'll figure it out. I know exactly where I'm going. So, for men, it's a lot more important because we don't do this naturally. For men, like, you know, like a man will have a child. A woman will have a child, and then the man will like be going on his business as usual, going to work and that sort of thing. And he's like busy at work, and someone's like, I heard you had a child. He's like, oh yeah! Alhamdulillah, that was pretty awesome. You know? And he's an awesome child. Like, usually around your second and third child, you start. Like the first child, maybe the guy's still really hypersensitive about the first child, really excited. But for women, it's way different. They cannot forget. It's like they're like wired to the child. You know? And so for men, it's a conscious effort. You have to do something. You have to like make an effort to try to spend that time with your child. That's why we very easily get lost in doing other things. We tend to get lost in our careers, in ta'aleem, other things. That's the way we're programmed. But we have to, because the Prophet did this. And we have to do this, and we have to be real men. A real man is not the one that screams and shouts, but the one that is the master of his own impulses. When you scream and shout, you're not a man, because you are not in control of your own emotions. Your emotions get you. You don't choose when you react. Just like Ali radiallahu anhu on the battlefield when the person spit in his face and he had the sword out. When he was about to attack him, he left because he said, I'm afraid that I'm going to kill you because of anger. He didn't want to do that. These people were in control of their emotions.
Questions? Q&A.
2 minutes. Just I mean, you got to give me a break. We have like a malfunction in the PowerPoint. I'll just end with this then. Basically, there are different kinds of parenting styles. There is a secure attachment that a parent forms with a child. This kind of attachment looks like this. Children are usually confident that the parent is available and responsive. They are exploration-oriented, emotionally positive, and they get soothed easily. Shows early empathy and ability to talk about emotions. They say that a parent should talk about emotions with their child. Talk to their children. Even when they're a baby, talk to your child. In fact, the more you talk to a child, it'll enhance their vocabulary. There's a correlation between the more you talk to a child, the greater their intelligence will be. and their vocabulary. So they know that the parent is available, that they're predictable, set a stability. Children respond to stability. There has to be stability in home. That's why I say, if you got issues, get the help you need for yourself. And figure out how to help yourself. Because if a child is seeing instability, they won't be stable. They will be doing compensatory behaviors. This is a psychological concept that they will do other behaviors to compensate for the instability. Such as, they didn't get enough love at home, they're going to find it elsewhere. They'll have a dependent personality, a dependence on others for love. So a woman will be with an abusive husband, for example. Why? Because she's dependent on him. And she needs him. Despite the fact that he's abusing her, that there's this unhealthy sort of attachment. And so secure is very good, and this is based upon sensitive, empathic parental caregiving and coherent parental discussion of emotions. Anxious is where the child is anxious. They cry a lot, they're angry, they lack confidence. They lack confidence that the parent is even accessible or responsive. They don't really explore their environment very much. And their attachment behavior is readily activated. What's the origin? The parent has a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty. The parent is self-centered. They don't really attend to the needs of the child. The mom is driven by her career, and she forgot how to be a mom and drops her off at daycare, for example. Or the father is really engrossed in his activities. He doesn't really do much but drop him off at Islamic school, or madrasa, pick him up, send him for Quran, and he hopes that one day, inshallah, the Quran will heal him. It doesn't work that way. And so where's the origin of this parental anxiety, self-centeredness, misperception of the child's needs? The person doesn't know what the child needs, not recognizing the needs of the child. Women tend to do this much better than men. Like, I have no idea why my baby's crying, usually. It's just annoying. But to be honest, from a male perspective, I know you guys don't think it, right? I mean, like you said, but for women, they're like, this is a poop cry. It's like, how do you know that? What's the difference between this one and that one? Avoidant this is the worst one, where the parent rejects the child, there's a lack of warmth, negative emotions all the time, there's very little physical contact, the child cries little during separation. They haven't even formed an attachment with the parent to such an extent that the child is like, I don't care if my parents here or not. They just like go without them. Here is a questionnaire that identified the attachments of parents and child relationship. So these are people in their adult stages. So they say, the person that says, I am uncomfortable with being close to others. These are the consequences, basically, of avoidant parenting. That I am uncomfortable being close to others. I find it difficult to trust them completely, difficult to allow myself to depend on them. I'm nervous when anyone gets close, and relationship partners often want me to be more intimate than I feel comfortable being in. You have these issues in marriages a lot. The person, that's why when somebody came to Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, he kissed a child, and another person came and said, you're the Amir al-Mu'mineen, you're kissing the child, you're supposed to be like a rough and tough guy to scare people. And he said, أنت لا ترحم ولدك فكيف ترحم الناس. That you don't show mercy to others, how are you going to show mercy to others? You don't show mercy to your child, how are you going to show mercy to others? Similarly, if the child doesn't show mercy, how is he going to be able to connect with others? Relationship partner, the anxious one is where relationship partners are reluctant to get as close as I would like. I often worry that my partner doesn't really love me. I won't want to stay with me, that he won't want to stay with me. I want to get very close to my partner, but this sometimes scares people away. This is the dependent personality, the person that clings to an unhealthy relationship. The best one is the secure, stable one, parenting. I find it relatively easy to get close to others, and I'm comfortable depending on them. I don't worry about being abandoned or about somebody getting close to me. They have a stress-free living where they can concentrate on their career, their life, on being a child, on playing, on learning, all the good stuff that we want our children to benefit from, but we need to provide them the stability to do so. And there's no shame in asking for help if you need to help in developing that stability. And so we'll end with that, and I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise our children on haqq, that He raised them to be the coolness of our eyes, and that He raised them to be the khuddam, the servers of this religion, and that He accept from us our behaviors, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just as we are trying to be merciful, we make an intention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be merciful with us, and in the moments that we cannot do tarbiyah of the child, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the murabbi, He is the ultimate murabbi, and that He does the tarbiyah of the child when we fall short. And we hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this gathering, and that He recognize that we came here on a Friday night to better ourselves and our families, and that even if we come short, that hopefully we hope in Allah that He will recognize that, and He will accept that from us, and He will help us in our endeavors. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.